We acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, the gathering grounds of many diverse First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples whose footsteps have marked this land and whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. Hello and welcome back to Research Recasted, the Knowledge Mobilization podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey Howlett, and today we are joined by Fiona Edwards-Akunesiobike. Fiona is an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at MacEwan University. She is also a PhD candidate at the School of Social Work at York University, where she also received her master's in social work. Fiona's research interests include child and youth mental health, specifically Black youth mental health, the racialization of mental illness stigma, anti-oppressive social work, race, racialization, racism, critical race theory, religiosity, and spirituality. Hello. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Fiona.
It's a pleasure to join you today.
Okay, so to start, could you tell us a little bit about your research regarding mental health in Black youth?
Absolutely. My current research explores the lived mental health experiences of Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth residing in Southern Ontario urban areas. These youth are between the ages of 16 to 18. They were accessing mental health services, religious and spiritual supports. And the reason for my research with Black youth, especially those from the Afro-Caribbean community, that is youth born in Canada of Afro-Caribbean background. These youth are very much marginalized in research, meaning that we hardly hear their perspective about mental health and their experiences. So my research is basically tailored to developing a Black youth mental health perspective in mental health, and also understanding the mental health experiences. So my main research question basically asks, what are the mental health experiences of Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth, and how do these experiences shape the utilization of mental health services? And one of the major findings in my research, speaks to Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth mental health experiences are the invalidation of their knowledge, invalidation of their emotions, invalidations of their feelings, and invalidation of who they are as Black youth. And this invalidation takes place within the school system, the mental health system, and the criminal justice system. Although these youths are invalidated within their home environment, it is not because of their race, but largely because of their parents and members of the Black community not understanding what the mental health experiences are, or even what mental health and mental illness constitute for this Black youth.
Wow. I know that, like, even for myself, and I acknowledge that I'm not I'm white, obviously. I know that mental health has been extremely stigmatized. And it's hard for a lot of people, especially because if you have parents that don't understand it or anything, it makes it that much more challenging to get help. Can you explain to us a little bit more about some of the challenges that specifically Black youth face when it comes to receiving this mental health care? Like, what are some specific examples?
Well, some of the challenges that they face, because some of the Black youth, they are not, because the mental health system is still Eurocentric, they are not receiving culturally appropriate and race-affirming mental health services. Because sometimes in mental health services, what happens, race sometimes, or more or less, is omitted. It is not taken seriously. But when we consider race into the mental health experiences of Black youth, then we can tailor services that speaks to the experience of being Black youth within the Canadian context. So there isn't a lot of Black youth specific mental health agency. So what we're saying is that these youth are not receiving the right services to cater for the mental health experiences. And as I said before, the mental health experiences of Black youth is about feelings, it's about emotion, it's about the knowledge, it's about who they are as Black youth, but it's not represented in the mental health services. And also what we see happening when it comes to Black youth and the mental health experiences, when it comes to adults and the system, like the mental health system, the education system, and the school system, they see this youth mental health as behavioral problems, right? And because they see it as behavioral problems, they tend to use a behavioral approach to address their mental health concern. And most of the time, they're not seeing mental health, they're seeing behavior, and they see the behavior as problematic. And in order to respond to the mental health needs of Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth, it is so important that we recognize what is happening for these youth and to basically give them the opportunity and the space where they can express themselves and also be listened to. What the youth want is to be validated. And because of who they are and their race and their experiences with systematic anti-Black racism, they are invalidated. They are not seen as the solution, but rather the problem. And in order for we to secure the well-being and the mental health for Black youth, we have to understand them. We have to provide the space where they can be listened to and, most importantly, heard.
Wow. I would have never have thought that like mental illness being seen as behavioral problems and taking the behavioral approach. So you mentioned they need a space and they need to be heard. Mm-hmm. What are some things that people can do to help mitigate these challenges and the stigma around mental illness?
Well, at the end of the day, based on what the findings show in my research, is that although mental illness stigma is a factor within the Afro-Caribbean community, but my research says that it is much more than the stigma. It's more about systemic anti-Black racism, which is the root cause of their mental health experiences being invalidated. Not to discount stigma, because it's still a big issue. And for the parents, they see mental illness as stigmatizing. And because of that stigmatization, it creates barrier for help seeking.
Okay. So you also mentioned that most of your research has been conducted in Southern Ontario, in urban areas. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed any differences between mental health care in Ontario as compared to here in Edmonton, Alberta? Because like we're on a completely opposite side of the country. Have you seen any differences?
To be honest, because I haven't worked directly within the mental health care system here in Alberta, it's hard for me to say. Okay. But what I can say based on extensive research, literature review, and other work that I take on is like Black youth, whether they are in Toronto, Southern Ontario urban areas, or here in Alberta, they still experience issues because of their race. And some of the challenges when it comes to mental health care is like adverse pathways to care. Some of them would enter mental health services through the criminal justice system. And that type of system, it's it's not the most, for a lot of youth, it's not the most effective way of entering mental health services. Because some of the youth, when I worked in mental health services, they enter counseling services through that mean they are less likely to open up about what is happening to them. And sometimes others see them as a problem because they come through the criminal justice system. First of all, you see them as, okay, they're the problem. So instead of really finding out and exploring what is happening for these youth, they are easy to labeled and stereotype because of this adverse pathway in which they entered mental health services.
Wow. Because so entering in through the court system enforces that their behavior is the problem and not the mental illness. What are some of the other ways that people can access mental health that you've seen?
Well, some of the youth, they can access mental health services through walk-in counseling. They can access it through referral from their parents, the general practitioner. It could be from friends. It could be from family members, or it could be self-referral. These are some of the ways that they can and do access mental health services. However, when it comes to Black youth and racialized youth, we're seeing like a disparity in how they enter mental health system. And most of the time, they are more likely to enter mental health services through the criminal justice system and referral from the school system.
Wow. I do want to ask, so you're from Ontario,
Yes.
Southern Ontario specifically. What brought you here to Edmonton?
I came here because I got the position as an assistant professor in the School of Social Work, and I found it to be a great opportunity where I can continue to build on my scholarship and to find a niche where I can continue to explore the mental health experiences of Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth. And I hope that sooner or later, I will be able to do like a comparative analysis of the experiences of Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth in Southern Ontario areas and here in Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to see. Yeah. So here at MacEwan, you've proposed a research project that's in collaboration with the Faculty of Nursing, Social Work, and Economics. Can you tell us a little bit about that proposal?
Yeah, this is for the establishment of a research group. And the name of our research group, proposed research group, is Black Community Research and Innovative Group. So we come together as in collaboration to do research with Black communities because we understand that there are different ways of knowing and different ways of being. And Black communities tend to be marginalized in research. So we want to make sure that we amplify their voices and give them the space so that we could understand the perspective from their own narrative and their own story. So the whole purpose of the research, as I mentioned, this research group, as I mentioned, is to explore issues within the Black community, such as mental health and health issues, socioeconomic issues. And as professors here at MacEwan University, the members of the group hope that once we conduct research, we can use the findings to incorporate in our teaching, because we want to make sure that we honor MacEwan University strategic vision of 2030 with its commitment to teaching excellence, research, community engagement, and building healthy partnerships. So we hope to do that by undertaking this research with communities, with Black communities here in Edmonton. And our research would also involve non-Black scholars because we want to approach our work from an EDI perspective. And we intend to build like a research hub here at MacEwan University where Black scholars and collaborators, community partners, students can come together and engage in meaningful research and knowledge mobilization.
Wow, that actually sounds incredible. And like the work that you're doing is so important because like mental health, especially nowadays, is so important, and to be able to receive the care and everything. Have you started doing any of that research for the proposal, or is it just in the proposal?
Well, we
stage?
submitted the proposal and we are waiting to see whether or not we get funded.
Okay.
Oh, we got the proposal. Okay, so we submitted the research proposal and we are waiting to see whether or not the proposal was accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And once accepted, we will start doing like a funding application to seek funding for the research that we will be undertaking. One of the first research that we want to undertake is to basically look at the role of technology in Black youth mental health and addiction.
Okay. I know technology is huge when it comes to talking about mental health and everything. Okay, so what inspired your research into mental health in the Afro-Caribbean youth here in Canada?
So, the reason for my research with Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth is because of my own experience working in mental health and have witnessed and seen the disparity in the mental health care and also diagnosis, because Black youth, from what I've seen, they are diagnosed at a higher rate with ADHD and conduct disorder. And also Black youth are marginalized in research. Like, we don't have an understanding of how they conceptualize mental health, well-being, mental illness, and what the mental health experiences are. And also, when I combed the literature, I was finding a lot of studies within the American context and also the United Kingdom, and very little research about Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth mental health within the Canadian context. And I wanted to find out more about their experiences. And because of the gap in the literature and my working experiences, my personal experiences working in the field, that drove me to wanting to conduct such a research.
So the fact that Black youth are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD and behavioral things, does that link back to you were saying that their mental health is seen as a behavioral problem? And do you think that because of those behavioral problems, that's why we're seeing so many diagnoses of ADHD?
I want to believe that, because if you actually understand what mental health is for Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth, the mental health is feelings, it's emotions, it's invalidation of who they are. If we take the time to understand that, then we will be better able to understand that it's not behavior, but it's mental health. And it's also tied to, the mental health is also tied to their struggles in society. And some of the struggles that Black youth face in society within the educational system, they are suspended, they are expelled, teachers have lower expectations for Black youth. And also within the criminal justice system, they receive longer sentences and harsher sentences. And there is a lack of funding for Black specific youth programs. So other disparities that Black youth face, including Afro-Caribbean youth within the mental health system, there is a lack of race and race-affirming mental health services, and also a lack of Black mental health providers. especially male providers, and also a lack of funding for Black specific mental health services. And I believe that addressing the mental health concerns of Black youth require that these gaps within the mental health system need to be addressed. So in other words, we need to restructure the mental health system to make sure that it is equitable and Black youth are seen, they are heard, and they are validated.
Wow. Which, I mean, obviously, that is something that we want to work towards, because everyone deserves to get the same level of care and to not be, I guess, cast aside because of the color of their skin, or to be seen as a behavioral issue rather than someone who genuinely needs help and understanding and support. Do you see that ever happening? Like, obviously, like you've been putting together a team to do research, to put this information out there. Do you see a world in which that everyone gets the care that they need? Or do you think that we have a long road ahead of us before we get there?
That would definitely be an ideal world. And that would be what we are seeking for equity, right? So for Black youth, especially Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth, those are youth born in Canada of Afro-Caribbean parents. Even though they are born in Canada, they don't feel like Canadian because of the color of the skin, because of the race. They are treated differently within those systems. So in order for we to get to a place of equity, we again need to restructure those dominant systems and incorporate different ways of knowing so that everyone's perspective can be included. And in order to secure the mental health and well-being of Black youth, we need to restructure the mental health system and build a system that incorporates a Black youth mental health perspective. So in order for we to fix what is broken, we have to involve the people so that we will know exactly what they need and what kind of system that they want.
Wow. Is there anything else you want to add on this topic that you feel like we haven't covered? Or
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, as it pertains to my research on the lived mental health experiences of Afro-Caribbean Canadian youth. So as I mentioned earlier, like the root causes of the mental health experience being invalidated is systemic anti-Black racism within dominant institutions like mental health system, the education system, and the criminal justice system. And I have seen how the activities of these dominant institutions intersect to create difficult pathways for Black youth, leading to their mental health experiences being invalidated. So we need to restructure. And because of the intersection of these institutions, what we're seeing is that a school to prison pipeline, we are also seeing a dual pipeline, which is from school to prison and from prison to mental health.
Wow. Well, I guess kind of my last question for you that I have is, what advice do you have for any of our listeners, whether it be students, staff, faculty, or anybody looking for mental health care or anything? What advice would you give to them?
Well, when it comes to mental health care, I think it's really important that people are knowledgeable about what is available and to seek the service that will allow you to have a good experience, right? Because you want to make sure that when you enter mental health services, it is safe. You feel that you are validated and you feel that you are listened to and not judged. So taking care of your mental health is so important. And it's also important that we recognize when others around us are not doing well mentally, and to encourage them and to ensure that we always uphold people. I think at the end of the day, I think it is so important that we do take care of our mental health and seek care that will match our needs.
Well, I want to thank you for being here today and for sharing your research. I also want to thank you for your research because it's so important, especially today.
Thank you very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share about my research.
Yeah, no. And we will we'll link resources for mental health in the description of the video for anybody who might need it.
Well, that's all we have for today's episode of Research Recasted. If you want to support this podcast, you can visit Research Recasted on your favorite podcast platform to find new episodes every 2 weeks. Also, don't forget to check us out on Instagram, where you can leave us a like, give us a follow, or send us any follow-up questions you have from today's episode. This has been Research Recasted, a knowledge mobilization podcast, brought to you by the Office of Research Services and the Faculty of Fine Arts and Communication at MacEwan University.